Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. This week, we are going to be discussing pain, suffering, pleasure, happiness, qualia, what it is to experience something, human nature, human experiential capacity, and a bunch of other things. This episode was sparked by a tweet from Aella Girl, a high-end sex worker, I suppose you'd call it, or sex worker to... I don't know. Anyway, she's also a Twitter celebrity. Anyway, she did a poll that is the following. We have it up on screen. Her poll was, Polska, how are you today?
I was kind of feeling just going right into it, guy.
Oh, we can. Okay.
No, I was kind of feeling that we just got into it, to be honest, because I'm like you, dude. I'm always good. So.
All right. Perma good. Okay, good to know. So we're going to jump straight in. So Aella Girl, on Twitter as Aella Girl, posted a poll yesterday or the day before, which I thought was quite interesting. So the poll says, pressing button A causes you to experience 30 seconds of maximum total pleasure along every possible experiential dimension. Button B causes maximum total pain. No lasting side effects, no trauma, withdrawal afterwards. Which would you press? Not at the same time, right? So that was her question. So it was just A, just B, both A and B, and then option D was neither. Now, I thought this was interesting. My initial thinking behind this was pressing button A is a bit of a trap, because if you pressed button A, you would experience maximum total pleasure along every experiential dimension. And I likened this to sort of, maybe people that try crack or meth or some sort of drug like that would always be chasing that feeling but never able to attain it. So I feel like it would sort of, it would numb or blunt your experience of most other things in comparison to that. Or it could leave you wanting to always chase that feeling. So to me, that was a no-brainer. I'm not going to choose A. Option B was interesting to me because maximum total pain for 30 seconds with no lasting side effects, no trauma, and no withdrawal afterwards. I thought that by pressing button B, this could actually be a bit of a hack. The reason being is, if that is the worst possible pain that you can experience, then after the fact, you could always make everything seem better than it otherwise might be, because it would never be as bad as that total pain. So that was my thinking. So I'm a button B or just B presser, and 4.5% of the poll was also that. So this is the contrarian take. This is not something that everybody else would push. 57.6% of people went for just A. And I think that's quite reflective of society currently, or certain parts of society currently, always seeking pleasure. And we can look at the consequences of this with the obesity epidemic and drug epidemics and many other epidemics that are currently existing. Polska, what's your take, or any thoughts on this so far?
To be honest, I thought it was kind of like a stupid question at first, because I was like, obviously I would just pick the pleasure one, you know what I mean? But after if I put some thought into it, I can sort of see where, how your take on this makes sense. And I'm hoping you can explain a little more about that, because I understand where you're coming from. And the point that you made about chasing the dragon, because this is what happens to drug addicts, right? They get high for the first time. You always hear heroin addicts say that, oh, like the first time was the best. And you're always chasing like that first time experience, which you can never get to, hence why they say chasing the dragon. So I can totally see why this experience of like the best feeling you've ever had for 30 seconds would be something that could impact you in such a way where heroin does. Because when people explain doing heroin for the first time, they say that it's like the best feeling ever, like it's better than an orgasm. So I could, equate maybe this feeling similar to that of a heroin type experience. So we know that heroin, that one experience actually can get people addicted to it. I don't know if it's the most addictive drug, but I do believe it's quite addictive, especially for people who have an addictive personality. But the thing is, with that 30-second rush of like feel good, whatever sensation that you get from this questionnaire, hypothetically, whatever it would be, you wouldn't be able to experience that again. So it'd be only one time. So it'd be difficult to have the same type of reaction that you would to heroin, because heroin, you can get again, right? But this one is sort of like a one-time only thing. So then your argument sort of shifts a little bit to the benefits of the pain versus the feel good, right? And how maybe you could possibly obtain more benefits from experiencing that pain, because you only get it once, either one. So please, can you try to explain a little bit more to me why you would choose the B? Because it's sort of making sense, but I kind of want to hear more. This is a very interesting take, especially because only 4.5% of people have chosen B, right? So
yeah, so it's definitely the contrarian.
And look,
view.
91. Oh no, I don't know. We don't know how many votes there were, right? But there's 94.1 thousand views. So
yeah, that's a decent amount of people. So she gets good numbers on the polls for sure. She does a lot of interesting stuff along these lines. Anyway, so to answer your question, before I answer it, just quickly, I'm going to push back on something that you said about heroin possibly being the most addictive drug, or especially if you have an addictive personality. So I'm a big fan of Gabor Mate's work on addiction and his sort of thought process or models for sort of viewing or thinking about addiction. And it isn't that anything is addictive in and of itself. It is the combination of what something can do for a person and their circumstance or their situation currently. So there's many cases of people. One of the biggest or most well-known ones to do with heroin was the U.S. military personnel in Vietnam who ended up using a lot of heroin while they were over there. But when they came back, they weren't addicted. They didn't seek it out. They didn't try and get more of it. So it's a unique combination of what a substance does for you and where you are and where you're at in your life, right? So for a lot of people, what they report with heroin is that all their worries and concerns go away. It is the most relaxing, calming, sort of blissful state for people. That's what it provides for them. And typically, if you would look at people that use heroin a lot, it's because they have a lot of pain or suffering or trauma or things they're trying to not think about or avoid in their life. And that's why they end up sort of becoming addicted to heroin. But his take is that no substance in and of itself is addictive or, more addictive or less addictive in a way. It's the combination of what that substance does and that person's personality or where they are in their life currently. Right? So that was the preface. But to address your question, why B? So it's essentially along those lines, right? So if you experience max pleasure, right, then everything else will kind of feel meh in comparison to it, right? It sort of desensitizes you to pleasurable things. So because you've had that upper bound of pleasure, then everything in comparison to that will seem vastly less pleasurable. Okay? Whereas if you invert it and you go B and you go max pain, then what it does is it gives you the maximal pain that you could experience, so that no matter where you are in your life, if you're going through some sort of suffering or pain or hard times or whatever, you could always think to yourself, well, this is nowhere near as bad as max pain. Like I felt what max pain is, and this is nowhere near as bad as that. So it's kind of like a hack in reframing, because things that would otherwise be really bad or really hard or really horrible for you or painful for you would never be as painful as max pain. And so to me, I was like, well, that's how I would take it, right? Because I've used this in my own life. Like I'm not saying I've experienced max pain, but I've been through trauma and painful experiences. I've had a operation where I was unable to get a pain medication, so I had to be awake during the procedure, right? And I could feel everything. That's pretty painful, but you learn how to process these things, and then because of those painful experiences, whenever I've been in another hard situation or a painful experience, I can always think back and be like, well, it wasn't as bad as that. And I've been through that and I survived that. So this is okay. So it's a way of sort of minimizing pain in a way, right? By feeling max pain, it minimizes it. You can use that max pain, which is that big, immense experience, to then minimize these other pains that would otherwise probably feel big and overwhelming. And then if you invert that for the pleasure thing, because you felt max pleasure, right, then every other pleasurable experience would be small in comparison. And so it would kind of take the joy or the pleasure out of a lot of things because it's nothing in comparison to max pleasure, right? So it seems counterintuitive, but to me, the way I was thinking through that, it's a no-brainer to pick B, right? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I'm mad feeling that take. And each time you say max pain, I immediately think of that video game, Max Payne, with the bullet time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It wasn't like super popular, but...
No, I do now. That's funny because my brain had not made the connection between the two. But yes, I do remember that video game. Wasn't bad, actually.
No, it was good. I think it was one of the first video games with like bullet time, where you like slow shit down and like dodge bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was fucking crazy. It was like a breakthrough game for me. I was like, oh my God, this is fucking sick, this bullet time shit. But then by the time the third Max Payne came out, like just, I don't know, the bullet time just wasn't cool anymore. Like, I don't know. I think maybe because too many video games started putting it in there. There's a Matrix game that was actually pretty good where you could play as Neo and the bullet time in it was fucking insane. But anyways, the Max Payne. So I'm kind of looking at this from the angle of ice baths, right? Because the whole idea behind ice baths, well, one of the big ideas behind it is this pain tolerance, right? Getting in there for like 3 to 5 minutes, focusing on your breathing, controlling your breathing, fighting against the urge to get out of there because your body's like, yo, let's get the fuck out of here. But you have to mentally dominate those emotions and those feelings and sit through it. You know what I mean? And what scientists have said, or people have hypothesized, is that giving your body this stimulation of like stress better equips you with dealing with other stressors during the day. And I guess I would categorize like that maybe with this pain idea that I think there's some overlap anyways with
Big
what
time.
you're saying, right? And
so it's the corny sort of term is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and it does, it resensitizes you. So the other thing is not just cold, but it's also heat. So obviously, like, that's two ends. You have max cold, and then you have sort of max heat. But by doing sauna, when you do sauna and you get the feeling that you want to get out, like it's overwhelming you, that you want to get out, that produces chemical hormone. I can't remember off the top of my head. Hopefully we'll be able to, I'll include it in the show notes. Or anyway, it produces this hormonal chemical in the body that resensitizes your dopaminergic system. So by staying in the sauna, even though your body is telling you to get out of the sauna for a period of time, after doing that, it resenses your dopaminergic system, right? You actually resensitize. So you can gain stimulation from things that would have previously been unstimulating because you had sort of, become sensitized to that level of stimulation. So that, you're exactly right. That was influencing my thinking of that. After going through experiences like that, being an ice bath proponent and a sauna proponent, and seeing the benefit in my own life and, literally hundreds of other people that have helped to go through these processes, I see that as being very valuable. And it is. It's kind of like, what often with the ice bath, it's like a lot of people get in, they panic. I can't do this. I can't do this. Just control your breath. Yes, you can. Every cell in your body is telling you to get out. You're going against that for a moment because you want to resensitize yourself, but you also know the health benefits in doing this, right? And it's not just health benefits, like, it is health benefits, but not just physical, it's also mental. And seeing the change in people and the confidence that instills with them, like, oh my God, like I did a minute or I did 2 minutes. I never thought that I could do that. It updates their own world model and their own model of themselves. Their idea of themselves changes because they proved to themselves that they could do something that they didn't think they could. And then after that, it's like other things just aren't as bad in comparison to that. And so it's that same line of thought exactly with choosing option B.
Interesting. Yeah, bro. I'm starting to realize there's lots of things that happen in life where pain sort of stimulates good something, right? For example, exercise. Exercise is another pain thing, or you have to tolerate. When you're lifting weights, you have to tolerate the pain, the muscle stimulation. When you're running or cycling, or any type of exercise, really, it's painful, and you have to sort of push through that pain to get the benefits from doing the exercise, and you have to do it chronically. So you have to build up this tolerance for pain, and you have to build up the physical attributes in order to push through more and more pain, right? Because we know that the lactate threshold moves up in people who do lots of cardio. So lactate threshold is like this threshold which the body has where it begins to produce lots of lactate. And when your body produces lots of lactate, it's not actually the lactate that stimulates muscle pain. I think it's like this hydrogen ions that are that are attached to the what? What did I just say?
No, yeah, hydrogen ions are produced. That's the typical burning sort of sensation that people refer to lactate. But lactate's incredibly valuable for the brain. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
No, that's all right. So professional athletes are able to improve their lactate threshold, so they can essentially work at a higher workload without having the same, like, the pain, right? So it's not only that their pain tolerance goes up, but I guess the lactate threshold also goes up. So I think that exercising is another really good example of how you have to, of how pain can be a benefit. And I'm kind of thinking, like, people who sort of get, I don't know if I want to use the word addicted, but they sort of, I'm just going to say addicted for now, to exercise or doing ice baths or saunas or working really hard. Anything that causes stress and pain in their life ends up being very beneficial, right? But if we get addicted to feeling good, only feeling good, like emotionally, when we're falling in love, for example, or drugs, or if we start getting addicted to those emotions that make us feel good, that's when we see a lot of destruction in life and a lot of hurt, and just things just go wrong when you're in sort of that type of mindset. So focusing on pain tolerance and getting sort of addicted to those sorts of things, I think, is a great motivator, and it really builds people into who they want to be, and makes us, just makes us better.
It's because there's a balance there, right? So just focusing on the pleasure and comfort, or, like seeking the pleasure, that's asymmetrical towards that pleasure access. Okay. Whereas doing things that are hard, that require some pain and a little bit of suffering, that then result in the pleasure, there's inherently more balance there, because you've gone down the pain and suffering axis, and then after doing that, you're sort of rewarded with that pleasure, right? And that's why those things typically are a little bit more healthy, because there is that balance there. You've explored both axes. Whereas if you just go for the axis of pleasure, we watch that it typically leads to horrible things. You look at, consuming certain foods for pleasure, right? This is, the obesity epidemic. Okay. If these people are eating to manage their emotions, they're eating for pure pleasure, right? They cannot stop. And then you look at the long-term consequences of doing so. So yes, I agree with you. Again, these things are about balance. It's not about getting rid of one. It's not about ending pain or ending suffering and just having pleasure. We know that leads to horrible things. It's a necessary feedback mechanism. So we're going to jump into this because a sort of well-known guy in the qualia space and in some quantum stuff, Aella Gómez, I think it is. Anyway, he retweeted. So if you just go back, I think we followed a link to get there. Yeah, so he retweeted this. Andrés Gómez Emilsson. If you read his bio, it says views of a transhuman neo-Buddhist from the future. Wait, from the future of, I can't read that. I need a closer one. Sorry, I just butchered that.
Views of a transhuman neo-Buddhist from the future of sociology, artificial intelligence, mathematics, philosophy, neo-noir film. I don't know what that is. And the post-singularity era.
Yeah, so interesting guy.
Noir film.
He's got a couple of interesting takes. I saw that he did a repost of this. And if you just show more on that tweet.
I think that's all of it.
Okay, so he reposted a Aella Girls poll, and he tweeted the following. So Andreas tweeted, "I should mention that nobody I've talked to who suffers from cluster headaches has said they are happy to know what they feel like. It's the epistemological benefit of this knowledge is simply not worth it. It's like the epistemological benefit of this knowledge is simply not worth it. I take their assessment seriously. I say this because people romanticize pain a lot. They use their interest and tolerance of pain as a social signal of strength and robustness. But at these levels, it's silly to think that way. The negative value of those experiences is inherent and not something that can be metabolized or benefit any self." So he then tweeted context, crazy people, and referred to the people that would push button B on the poll. And so I tend to disagree. And so I replied to his tweet, and we have the following reply. So I wrote, "Of course they don't, because it is something that happens to them without their consent and little to no control over it, which, in my opinion, is a different thing to being able to choose to experience something for a limited time with no material consequences." If you just scroll down again, I can,
Sorry, guy, fucked up.
No material consequences. That experience could be useful. That was my tweet to him. So I think that there is a difference between something happening to you without your consent, without your ability to control it or to choose to participate in it, versus something that you are choosing to do for a limited period of time with no lasting consequences. So that, to me, they're two very different things. So then he replies, and if you just click show more on his reply, that'll help me. So he goes, "I would make the case that for those levels of suffering, consent doesn't apply. There is no will, no personality, no anything human at those levels. Plus, an empty individualism frame would highlight the intrinsic moral patienthood of those moments of experience. So no lasting effects isn't much consolidation for the experienced in the middle of it." Now, that is a very complicated way to say essentially the following, that if you are experiencing max pain, although he has now switched the conversation from pain to suffering. So he doesn't address pain here. He says those levels of suffering, which to me is different to pain, and we'll get into that in a minute. So he switched it to suffering, and in his framing, I can understand where he's coming from, right? So my reply, essentially what he's saying is that if you're experiencing max suffering, there is no other thing to experience. There is no being human. There is no nothing. It is just suffering. It's all suffering. All your bandwidth, all of the experiential capacity is filled with suffering. So there is no space for there to be any human experience, because all possible bandwidth is being taken up by suffering. Does that kind of make sense, Polska?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So he's
I can see why there would be different things.
Yeah, so he's talking at like the sort of like, metaphysical level, whereas to me, her poll was referring to people and their ability, like the maximum experience that a human, whilst still being human, can have, right? So there is still, in max pain, it's not all pain. It's, 99% pain and 1% still being yourself, if that kind of makes sense. So max pain is not actually max possible pain at the meta level. It's the max pain that a human can experience whilst still maintaining their identity and selfhood to some degree.
Yeah, and I would also argue that, and I think you mentioned this before, it's in a controlled setting too, right? So you're choosing to press A or B. So it's not something that's out of your control. So it's a different type of experience, I think, as well.
Correct. Absolutely. That was the main point of my sort of contention with what he was saying. Now, if we go down, okay, so I acknowledge, I go, okay, if the idea that extreme suffering strips away all aspects of what we consider human, then who is experiencing the suffering? Who is it affecting? If there is nothing human at those levels, if there is nothing but suffering at that extreme, then what is experiencing this? Right? So then he replies, it's a sentient being, or rather moments of experience. The fact that the content of a moment of experience has the qualia of being a human is not what grants it moral significance, but the fact that it's a subject per se. Right? So that was his reply. Now, here he's definitely missed what I was saying, and he's chosen to focus on a very different level of this. So, I was like, if the human is being completely stripped away, right, then how is the human suffering, right? Because there is no human at those levels of suffering. Okay, so he specifically was referring in his initial post to the cluster headaches. And so I would argue that they're not experiencing max suffering. They're experiencing pain and suffering, but it's not max because it's still affecting them as a human, if that kind of makes sense. So this gentleman, Samuel Garcia, replied to these, and he noted that pain is not a precise term. So cluster headache pain ain't weightlifting, sensory motor pain, nor a 1 millimeter cut in the foot due to walking in a wild forest pain, nor a lover's heartbroken pain, nor a marathon runner constellation of pains. Precision is needed in order to address these problems. So I agree with him in that regard. So again, with the whole max pain thing with the Aella girl tweet, to me, that was the maximum pain that you as a human could experience. Now, for different people, that max pain will be different. I don't doubt that, but it would be the maximum pain that one's sensory or nervous system or the body, the being could generate. And that would be your experience of max pain, not this sort of, metaphysical maximum pain or maximum suffering space that no human could experience because it's vaster than any one human. Does that kind of make sense?
So you're coming from the idea that we can gain many benefits from having this, immense amount of pain. So we're better equipped to sort of deal with stressors and pain in life going forward because we've just experienced max pain, right? And there's sort of, Andreas is not really directly, I think, arguing what the bulk of your point is. And I think what happens usually, and what happens a lot of times in discussions or arguments, the person will choose the thing that they feel most about, and they'll focus on that thing. And sometimes they're missing what the bulk of the argument is. And that's sometimes very difficult to understand sometimes, especially if you feel a certain way about, just like a section of something that you wrote. And I'll focus my energy on arguing that point and sort of missing what the bigger point is. Because I think if Andreas, or he probably does maybe understand your point, but maybe he doesn't have a rebuttal for what the bulk of it is, and he sort of chose to go this direction. Or it could be that maybe he doesn't understand what the bulk of your point is. I'd be curious to know where he's coming from and what his perspective on that would be. Because if he isn't getting like what the bulk of your argument is, and he did, I'll be curious to what his rebuttal would be to what that would be. You know what I mean? Because it's a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think his bio sort of informs a lot of what, like we can infer a bit from there, but you can also, he's got a bunch of videos on like qualia and quantum related, experiential things pertaining to high doses of DMT and all these different things. So he's like a qualia research guy. Okay. So that should tell you a lot. Now, if you just click, if you click on his tweet, I would make the case that those levels of suffering consent don't apply. I think if you look at the retweet on that, it should take us to somebody who retweeted that. Because I just want to also bring a point to this, because we're going to discuss the usefulness of pain and why pain is actually a very useful thing. So if you click on...
What do you want me to click on? Because I didn't hear what you said because I started fumbling
you click on that,
with the windows.
I would make the case. The case. So there should be a retweet button down. A little...
Is it this one? I don't know how to use Twitter, guy. I'm sorry.
It's to the left too. The one with the one next to it.
Oh, this one.
Don't click it to repost it. We want to look at who reposted it. So if you click next to it, I think it should work. Click on view quotes.
Oh, reposts?
No, just view quotes.
View quotes?
Okay. Yeah, and then it'll say no quotes, then go to reposts. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so click on this guy, right? So this guy retweeted this. Suffering should be abolished. I am utterly and undescribably harmless. Compassion. So I thought...
Yes.
He really got me there. And I'm like, suffering should absolutely be abolished. And that got me thinking, why? Why should be abolished? Even for myself in my own life, moments of suffering have been some of the most useful to me long term. So obviously going through the suffering is not a great experience. That's why it's called suffering. But after the fact, the perspective that it gave me was incredibly valuable. More valuable than having gone through the suffering. That was a tongue twister. So firstly, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times the far left or the liberal communist mindset have these beautiful ideas, but then there's no actual plan of how to get there, and there's no thinking about down the road how this may affect the future. It's just we just need to feel good now. Everyone needs to just feel good now. End suffering. Okay, how and what are the effects of that long term? And they don't have the answers. It's just about emotions right now in this moment. So I think that there's a big just group of people out there that have that sort of mindset. It's a little bit of an immature mindset, I would say, because life is suffering. I mean, Jordan Peterson says it all the time. Life is suffering. It is. We have to deal with a lot of shit. And
with moments of happiness.
Normal. Yeah, exactly. Because if we didn't suffer, if we didn't have pain, we wouldn't appreciate the good shit as much. And that's just a fact. It is what it is.
And without problems, we would have no reason to problem solve. We would have no reason to do many different things. So I just want to quickly pivot from, we'll take what you've just said and use a really, in my opinion, good example of this. So, Holsker, have you ever heard of people that are born without the ability to feel pain?
I've only ever heard of it once. I actually, it's funny that you asked that because I did see a short, maybe it was a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, of this girl. She was a young girl, and it was explaining that she's unable to feel pain. And I was like, whoa, that's insane. Zero, no pain. I was like, whoa, that's wacky. That's out there. Wow.
Did it go into any
that way?
Yeah. Did it go into any more detail?
I don't remember. I mean, it was a while ago. I just remember being shocked at the fact that there was someone, I think she was maybe she was a little girl. I can't even speculate how old she was, but yeah, they were just they were showing shots of her doing different things and explaining that she's unable to feel pain, nothing. I was like, wow, that's fascinating. What a life.
It is incredibly fascinating, and it's not very well known. Not many people are aware of this, and you typically don't or won't see them be much older than children. right? So a small percentage of the population is born without the ability to feel pain. Now, it is actually really quite sad because even though they can't feel pain, they don't live very long because they typically will destroy their bodies because they have no feedback to stop doing something, to not do something. They are not aware of when they injure themselves or when they hurt their bodies. They obviously if they visually see it, they can see that they've hurt themselves, but they can't feel it, right? So most of the people who are born with this die at a very young age. Again, you won't see very old people that have this because in order to survive or stay alive, they have to develop very intricate and very thorough procedures to continuously check their bodies to make sure that they haven't done something to hurt themselves or to injure themselves severely. Right. So their lives mainly consist of, checking to see that they haven't inflicted some harm on themselves because they can't feel that pain. Right. So this to me was an interesting phenomenon. And you think about it, okay, wow, inherently you sort of just might think that pain is a bad thing and you should avoid pain at all costs. But wait, pain has a use. Pain is a mechanism that the body utilizes to bring your attention to things that are of importance. Wow. So avoiding pain completely is not the answer, that's for sure. Understanding its usefulness and understanding what the body uses it for is a very interesting thing, right? So there's a bunch of interesting stuff written about children or people that are born with this inability to feel pain. But doesn't that that frames it in a very interesting way, don't you think?
I was kind of thinking, imagine what you said about them dying at a very young age because they're not able to have that continuous check, self-check, right? And I was thinking about sometimes, have you ever gotten a cut and you didn't even realize that you had that cut? And suddenly you're like, yo, I kind of have this weird pain, or you notice it because you're bleeding or something. What the fuck? When did that happen? And then suddenly you can feel it now. You can feel that pain, right? And you have to attend to that cut because it hurts, or you have to clean it. But if you never felt that pain, then you wouldn't think that, you'd have to attend to something. It's kind of a bad example because I gave the example saying that you're unaware of it at first until you see it. So maybe that was not the best example, but for example, okay, you're playing basketball and you sprain your ankle.
Yeah.
And you don't feel it. So you just keep playing, right?
Yep.
You're going to fuck it up way more.
Literally. Yeah, absolutely. So that gets to the crux of it. Another good example is anyone who's had, dental work done where you have a local anesthetic injected into your mouth. So the mouth goes numb. Lots of people will end up chewing on their tongue or chewing on the side of their mouth because they cannot feel the pain, and they destroy their tongue or the side of their mouth whilst the local anesthetic is active. Then when it wears off, they're like, what the fuck? When did I do that? They don't even know that they did it because there is no feedback, right? So this is a very important concept when we talk about systems as well, right? So systems that don't have negative feedback fucking end up blowing up essentially, right? You need negative feedback in a system to constrain some behavior in some dimension, right? Or an action in some dimension. Things that are just continuously positive feedback will end up sort of destroying themselves. You need some negative feedback, pain being that negative feedback. You were laughing at my anesthesia and people chewing their tongues in their cheek.
Because you're they're just eating their own face. I don't know why that I found that so funny. I don't know why.
Well, because they don't know that they're doing it. They can't feel it. This is the sort of stuff that happens when you don't have pain, dude. This is what I'm trying to get at. Abolishing suffering and abolishing pain is taking away a very important feedback mechanism, not just for the individual, but for society, right? This is it's completely unrealistic to think that getting rid of pain or getting rid of suffering is actually going to be net useful.
It's a fascinating point, Rubes. Pain, we need pain to survive.
Precisely.
We need it to survive. Yeah, that's wild. That's a really good take. I love that. Yeah, because going back to my basketball example, spraining your ankle, right? That's just like a low level injury. So
Yeah.
the only reason why you can get that ankle to heal is because, okay, now I know I can't move it. Now I know I can't walk on it. Now I know I have to, like, take a break from being on it all the time. But also in the recovery process of that ankle, you need to do things that generate a little bit of pain, but not too much, so you don't cross this threshold to make it worse, but just a little bit in order to stimulate recovery. And that's all sensory based. And if you didn't have that, then you wouldn't know how to push yourself and you wouldn't get to recover. And you can apply that to so many things. Think about, another like pain example that you have to sort of go through is fasting, for example. There are benefits from doing fast. I don't know if you agree with this, by the way, but I heard Dana White talking about this new sort of fasting that he's been doing. And
yeah, it's not definitely not new.
One of
it's
his
new
buddies.
for him. It's new for him. Fasting
new
is,
for him. Sorry.
It is as old as life is, in a sense.
Yeah. Just the maybe the technique. But he was explaining that a good friend of his, I don't know if it's a doctor or just someone he goes to for any sort of health advice.
It's a doctor who has some decent takes on some stuff and then has some completely ridiculous takes on other things. But he's blowing up on social media currently, but largely because of his ridiculous takes. But he's helping Dana White massively. So yes, keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, Dana White has had a huge turnaround in his health. Dude, like a couple of years ago, it looked like he was going to pop. And now he's fit, vibrant, like his skin looks good. He's not red anymore. Like he's changed, man, completely. So whatever he's doing it's working. And he said that one of the things that he does is he fasts for extended period of times, like 3 days or 4 days or something in a row. And he does that a couple times a year now or something like that. And he's saying that stress stimulus gets your liver to excrete certain proteins or certain hormones. I can't remember what it was, but these sort of facilitate benefits.
Yeah. I'll jump in because I actually have a protocol that I use with people, pretty well versed. So fasting, right, which would be considered by many, many people. And how do I know this? Because this is the feedback I have got from hundreds of people, is it would be considered short-term suffering, right? A lot of people report that they suffer for the first 24 hours. It tends to get better after the 24 hours. But to a lot of people, this is like the worst possible thing that they could imagine doing, is not consuming food for an extended period of time, right? So this is just framing this. So what is fasting? Well, fasting is temporarily depriving your body of exogenous food sources, right? So what this does is essentially you have like two phases in the body. You have store and storage, right? Or getting rid of, okay? So when you're consuming food, you're in a storage phase. You're sort of storing things, you're building, you're doing all of that. When you're not consuming, you switch over to this sort of cleaning up and this sort of getting rid of, excreting, detoxifying is another term, or recycling. Now, what happens when you fast for an extended period of time, your body can go into a state called autophagy. And this is where your own body will actually go around and start to recycle cells, different things within your body that are not functioning as they should, or not performing the job that they are meant to be performing. It also is when your body will kill cancerous cells, or cells that have errors in them, or error codes, or cells that, again, not performing the way that they should. And it actually breaks these down, it kills them, it destroys them, it recycles the parts, and then uses those parts to build anew, right? To get rid of those errors, to get rid of the cancers, to get rid of all of that stuff. So autophagy is fantastic for health. A lot of people will actually refer to this as the known cure for cancer. right? Is because we're always developing cancerous cells to some degree, but the body does, find them and get rid of them. But for people who have, big amounts of cancer, it has been, many people have shown that fasting for an extended period of time, like the 2, 3, 4-day, even 5-day fast, is a great way to, upregulate that autophagy. So autophagy kicks in at about the 72-hour or 48-hour to 72-hour mark. And so that's your 2 to 3 day fast. And this is why those 3-day fasts are so valuable, and a 4-day fast even more so. But yes, that's essentially it. When you're not consuming, you force your body to have to start to recycle, right? So think about, humans is a nice analogy, right? Because we are becoming more conscious of the amount of resources we use and consume as a society, right? We are depleting certain ones. We're forced to think about recycling more. Whereas before, we never had to think of recycling, really. It just was in and out kind of vibe. So by having that limitation, by not putting things into the body, by not consuming those exogenous nutrients and proteins, fats, carbohydrates, etc., you force your body to go through and start to clean itself up. Right? That's autophagy. But you can regenerate organs, you can regenerate all sorts of different things. It is fantastic. And if you look at Islamic religions, they have a fasting period built into their religion because of the benefits. They might not have known the exact mechanisms as to why or how this worked, but they obviously knew that doing this once a year or throughout the year at different times, it provided an immense benefit to the people of that religion.
It's called Ramadan?
Yeah.
40 days?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never done a fast for extended period of time. The longest fast that I've done has been 36 hours. And I've done 36 hours a bunch of times, but I've never gotten to the, what's it called? The autophagy phase?
Yeah.
I've never gone there before. So I'm assuming you've done it then.
Yeah, absolutely. A few times. Actually, just recently, I moved and eating some different food, venturing out onto the streets of where I currently am. Ended up not feeling the greatest, having a bit of a stomach bug thing that I picked up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this as an opportunity to do a bit of a cleanse and a detoxification and a fast. And so I ended up fasting for a few days, and it was fantastic. I also used to have to do this when I was bodybuilding, when I was quite large, about 130 plus kilos. I would periodically have to fast because my digestive system would get so hammered, and it would end up getting quite inflamed over an extended period of just consuming like 7,000 calories a day for extended periods of time. It would just smash my digestive system and my overall health, in my opinion. So I would periodically fast to give it time to repair and recuperate itself without having to worry about digesting. So because continuously consuming is that storage phase, getting not consuming is that detoxification, that repair phase.
Do you continue training while you're fasting?
No. So I do very low intensity. So like, you go for a walk, you could go for like a light swim, those kinds of things. But typically I advise people listen to their bodies, and it can be a great opportunity to catch up on some sleep and sort of just relax a bit more, spend a little bit more downtime. But I do advise to still move your body each day, but low impact. The first day you can do a little bit of stuff, but you don't necessarily want to be doing too many strenuous things. You definitely want to give your body the time and the space to go through and do that repair process.
So what's your water intake like for those days?
Really high, and electrolyte intake is really high. And the other thing that I like to have when I'm fasting is like a nice bone broth and things like that. So bone broth's just like a little bit of collagen, but there's nothing really to digest. You're sort of just giving like fluid, minerals, electrolytes, and things like that to your body, so that you're still able to keep some level of hydration.
Okay.
Because what you'll notice after like 2 days is you start to drop some glycogen from the muscles, and every gram of carbohydrate that's stored in the muscle is glycogen. You need 3 milliliters of water. So as you start to drop that, you do start to drop a lot of water from the body. So it is important to maintain hydration, but not just drink water, to consume lots of electrolytes. And also, again, bone broth I found is another good way of consuming electrolytes, but also getting some glycine and some collagen in as well for the gut, so that you can provide it a little bit of nutrients to help facilitate its repair.
So the bone broth doesn't affect the fast because you're not actually digesting something.
Yeah. Okay. It's very minimal.
Interesting.
It's more like,
and did you ever get to the?
It's more like food for the flora and fauna of your gut, or the microvilli, the little bits within the gut.
Okay. Did you ever get to the point where you were shitting out like this green substance?
I've had that one time. Yeah, definitely had that one time.
And that's like, what is that? I don't remember what that is. I've heard of it happening after a long fast, though.
It could be a bunch of things. I don't specifically know what it is, but you could hypothesize maybe it's some sort of like bile salts, the bile that gets deposited, dropped in from your gallbladder. It could be a bunch of funky stuff coming out. I'm sure it could be, for some people, it might just be like the remnants of their colon, like a dirty colon, that's cleaning out finally. There could be lots of stuff, but no, typically I don't end up going to the toilet very much at all. Like there's almost no going to the toilet because there's no digestive load. There is nothing to sort of get rid of. But I can imagine people that have, that don't have clean colons, or have constipation or backed up, that there could be a lot of funky stuff that comes out for sure. Okay, I just want to just one quick side tangent. So when I was bodybuilding, I did a, like back in the bro phase, I did like an all fish diet when I was getting lean for a competition, and I was eating literally just fish, dude. And then I was eating orange roughy, which is like a delicious fish, but I stopped eating it because it's like a very old fish from New Zealand, and it was overfarmed. Anyway, orange roughy is delicious, and I was eating orange roughy and hoki or some other fish like that. And I remember after like the 7th day of just fish, I did a green shit, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" That was an experience. But yeah, sorry, small tangent.
No, that's mad funny, guy. Is this bottom feeder fish, or is this like, because you have to be careful of eating that much fish, right? Because of mercury levels, but certain fish don't have mercury.
Yeah,
as well.
So orange roughy is like a beautiful fish, but like it's probably the most delicious yum flesh fish there is. It's my favorite fish, but it's an old, they grow to be very old, and they were severely overfished, and so the population of orange roughy has diminished a lot.
Okay. So some secondhand anecdotal anecdotes that I've heard about doing these long fasts is that people continue shitting like somewhat normally, and after so many days, their body like excretes like this like abnormal looking shit that's, I think, something like green, and people look at it and they almost think like, yo, is that my intestine? Like it almost looks like intestine to some people, and I don't remember the explanation, but it's something along the lines of what you were saying. It's like this toxin that the colon can finally release because there's no shit left in the body. But you didn't continue shitting throughout the fast.
No,
regularly.
That's the beauty. Okay. So a lot of people don't necessarily know what, like, they think that shit is like the food that they ate. No, the bulk of shit, like over 60-70% of it is dead bacteria from fermenting and, fermenting the food that you ate, right? So the more plant matter that you eat, the more bacteria are required to ferment that plant matter to try and extract nutrition, or to break it down, then the more shit you'll have, right? So the less things that you ingest that require the bacteria to assist with that digestion, then the less shits you'll do. And when you're not eating at all, then there's no digestion. So there's no dead bacteria. There's not as many dead red blood cells, all that sort of stuff required. So then you just don't shit as much. So for me, yes, I don't. But I know that initially, when I first, way back in the day, bodybuilding, all the rest of it, starting fast, yes, there'd be, you would get rid of a lot of stuff, right? There'd be a big cleanse, okay? And that's just the simplest way to think about it. Your body is detoxifying. It's cleansing. A lot of people will be like, I'm drinking a detox tea. I'm drinking this. Well, the best way to detox is to just not consume anything other than water and electrolytes. If you're just consuming water and electrolytes, your body will start the detoxification process. It will start releasing things. If you're continuously consuming, your body will just store. So yeah, the best way to detox is to not consume and to fast.
So pain from hard working can get you ahead in life. Pain from exercising can get you healthier. Pain from ice baths can help you deal with stress better. And pain from fasting can also make you healthier. So look at how all these types of pain, like if you incorporated all these types of pains in your life, you could substantially improve your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. Like it's crazy to think that pain is so important, eh?
Yeah.
Like it's probably more important than, sorry, what?
Well, yeah. So whether or not it's more or not, the crucial thing to understand is that what makes life a beautiful thing is the diversity of experience, is to not just be biased towards one dimension, that pleasure dimension, or the enjoyment axis, or whatever you want to call it. It's a diversity of those things. What gives us pleasure is that there is pain. It's the same. We talk about this all the time, but it's a balance between those things. You don't want to be too biased in any one direction. You want to have the ability to sort of move between those boundaries. Pain being on one end, pleasure being on the other, suffering being on one end, and joy being on the other. Is that what makes life beautiful? Is the balance between them, right? So again, what gives us darkness, what gives us light, gives darkness. Because we know darkness, it means that we can know the contrast between that, which is light. Because because there is an up, there will be a down, that kind of thing. It's that whole understanding that the beautiful thing about life is being able to explore the differences, being able to explore the differences between a whole space of different things, and pleasure and pain is just one of those. And again, I'll just preface this with we're not saying pain is this, awesome thing. If that's what if all you ever live is pain, it's going to be painful by definition, right? It's understanding that pain is a useful thing for us as beings that live in this universe. Again, without it, you see that these children that are born with that inability to feel pain, they don't live very long. And so there is something there. And I think that, it's often looked at as being this just completely horrible thing, instead of actually understanding that it is useful as well.
Yeah, realizing that we require pain to survive. And we also require pain to become better versions of ourselves as well. We got to go through it.
Big time.
Because a large part of life is suffering. So we can enjoy the goodness of life as well.
Absolutely. And sometimes what makes it good is the fact that it isn't the suffering, right? And so without that, it would just be meh. It'd just be all the same, which to me would be horrible. But I just want to also just quickly hit this last sort of point, right? Is, a lot of people, what is pain? And, people say, well, pain is real to me. And then there's you can't trace it in the body. People say pain isn't real, right? Because there is no sort of, thing to pinpoint what is pain, right? So pain, one way to think about it is that it is the body's way, nervous system's way of getting your attention and bringing your attention to something, right? That is very valuable. So why is pain feel the way that it does, right? Because it has to. It has to feel that way because it has to get your attention, right? If it wasn't as bad as it was, or it wasn't any of this, then we wouldn't pay attention to it. Like, we know us as humans, we'd just be like, yeah, fuck that shit, right? So it has to be that. And if you think about it in that frame, it is actually used by our bodies to bring our attention towards things that need our attention. So when you're feeling pain about something, it's because you should be paying attention to something about this. And the way to get, away from that pain is to deal with the thing, right? Is to address the thing that your attention is being drawn to. So if you're in a circumstance in your life that's painful, or you're suffering in that circumstance, it's because you need to be paying attention to that thing. Do what you haven't done, right, to deal with that thing. Do the thing you're avoiding doing. Okay, that's typically the solution, right? That's why, again, inversion is such a powerful tool. And take it all the way back to the beginning of this pod with that poll. How many people don't invert? How many people just went straight for pleasure? That's a trap. It's an absolute trap to just seek that experience. But that's the bulk of what people chose. Very few people inverted that and actually looked at it from that reverse frame, or that inverse frame of, hold up, if I experience max pain, then everything in comparison to max pain can feel good, right? And so, oh shit, if I'm going through pain in my life, I could always think, oh wait, it's not as bad as that pain, which would instantly make the pain shrink and feel less than what you would otherwise experience it as. An incredibly valuable tool. Like we discussed, you have ice baths, you have sauna, you have all these other mechanisms to go through and desensitize yourself to that pain. And it is a very valuable thing.
Well, I'm convinced, Guy. So I'd like to say thank you to my pain receptors for giving me pain. And suddenly I'm kind of liking pain now, Guy. I might get into that SMH shit. Pay someone to fucking whip me once in a while.
I don't know if you need to go to that level. I think you could probably just get a couple of ice baths, go for a hard VO2 max session, or do something along those lines, and desensitize yourself in that regard.
Hell yeah! I guess there's a good example of being addicted to like a strange type of pain, right? I remember watching the show Billions. You ever see that show?
Yeah. And
one of the main characters, that's like his thing. Like, he has like these private sessions where he pays someone to just whip him in sexual way, and like dominate him, make him feel like lesser of a human.
Yeah. Notice what his job was and where he worked. Politician guy. Politician.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah. This is surprisingly common in people in positions of power like that, especially governmental positions. And I have like a bit of a thing. I'm like thinking to myself, like, do they intrinsically deep down wish to be punished for what they're actually doing? And this is a way of sort of dealing with that. But anyway, that's a whole nother pod. We'll leave you with that bombshell. Guy, thank you very much for today. That was fun exploration. And thank you, listeners, for sticking through to the end. We appreciate you, the people who do listen all the way to the end. You are our true believers. Thank you very much. Guy, have a lovely evening. Peace out, everybody.
Love you, dude. Peace.
Love you too, Guy. Bye.
Bye.